Yeah, you're
Okay,
good with it.
cool. Yeah, just for like if it whatever turns into a great conversation or something, we may want to share or something like that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah,
You never
like
know.
you said, we both know. So
Yeah, yeah, that's the only thing, like, privacy protocol and all that.
perfect. Yeah, when you're speaking in terms of protocols, for sure. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, it's been a long journey figuring
So
that stuff
there,
out.
and I know that was part of it. Was like when we first started talking, and we've talked in a couple different ways, right? And
Hmm.
I think it's sort of normal that we all, a lot of us that grew up in the internet came from backgrounds where, you didn't use your real name and internet stuff. You had an internet
Yeah.
persona and you had real life persona, and then maybe it evolved to where you have a couple internet personas. I mean, I think that all depends on how different people adopted the technology over the years and how it like worked their way in and
Hmm.
generationally where you were at in that evolution.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's interesting that you've seen people things collapse more and more, and then like it varies, right? Like Facebook was originally all real names, and then people started making up fake names because then they're like, wait a minute, I don't actually want my personal life to be completely on display.
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize it was going to get like this.
Yeah, there's dangers to that for sure. I kind of got over it years ago, though. I just throw my name out there. Try not to, like, the address thing is kind of a little sketchy, as far as like sharing that, but
Well, sure, sure. No, and I totally agree with that. But yeah, it's just an interesting identity issue that I think I'll be admitted that I've dealt with over the years, and just in
mhm,
terms of talking about different things and what's socially acceptable in one realm and not. But
yeah.
it's also just a function of any sort of social interaction that you're going to scope your discussion to what's appropriate for that social interaction. So that, I mean, that in
Hmm.
itself isn't new. Um, but I think the degree to which people are able to use different identities or use technology to sort of go into different parts of their identities and personalities,
Hmm.
um, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's sort of an
Yeah, the
aside.
internet really gives us that, like, the ability of anon, so to speak, or anonymous.
Yep.
Like, it kind of like it's a kind of an outlet for like the shadow to come out, you could say, like things that you
If
would
you're going
just
to be
never
Jungian, yeah.
cannot say, things that's associated to your identity, but that, it may be, it's kind of a thing. Like, you have a feeling for a reason, right? Like, there's a reason you feel certain ways, or trying to navigate the categories of the mind, or how, like, like, into identity politics and racism and all that kind of stuff. Like, it gets tricky. I don't know, like, to navigate those things, and you especially don't want it attached to your identity. Sometimes, like, I see a lot of that just coming out on like 4chan or whatever, these anon type
Yeah, in the
things.
anonymous boards in particular, I think it was a really interesting evolution to see those go from an uber free speech, and like a lot of the point was like, well, you can't filter anything. If you're gonna, who's deciding, who's doing the censoring, right? So
Right.
we're just not going to filter anything, and it was debatably okay for a while, um, and then it's interesting that you saw it really start to skew a certain way, and get too shadow. It was just all shadow then at some point, because I
Yeah.
think you saw other people that were more moderate abandon those platforms when they started seeing the extreme come in. And I think you talked about this some with Anders and stuff, just unlike the um, I think you guys have their own. I'm not trying to lump you together. I just met you kind of in the same
Yeah.
thing, but that you see these in these public discussion forums, or Reddit or anything, right? You see a lot of differences in opinion, and the more you like demonize one thing, the more you just push the people you're demonizing into, you know, you push them out of the conversation entirely. So now they don't have
Hmm.
anything to modulate them because they're only interacting with other people.
Right.
And the same goes for whatever category you want to, put people in, right? It goes for it goes for the opposite of what I think I have in mind when I was just discussing that too, right? If you are of any mindset that you're in, you have the possibility to go into a pod where you're only interacting with people of that mindset.
Right. Yeah.
And then if you don't interact with people, and like if you don't pull people into society, into social interaction, you can't ever form a different understanding of your realities. You know,
Right.
they're working, someone else is working off a certain set of information, and you're working off a certain set of information. And as you've, well described, you have this handshake protocol when you start meeting, and whether or not you realize it's going on or not. And I think that's the
Hmm.
big, that's something I don't think I've seen you emphasize a lot, but maybe you have, and I just missed it because there's a lot of, a lot of writing and material. But
Uh-huh.
um, just the fact that all the protocols, when I've seen you try to introduce protocols to people and they're trying to grasp them, um, like these are all happening anyway. We're doing,
Yeah.
you're doing the handshake protocol when you're meeting. It's not like we're trying to describe something that's not already happening, and I would
Yeah.
describe it in a different way, or whatever. I just use different words. But as you noted in the paper I just read, you're only using the words until. And I just went through this with somebody the other day. I'm like, well, words. This is the problem. We were arguing about what flow state meant. Well, we were discussing what flow state meant, but
Right.
it was immediately interpreted that I was saying I knew what a flow state was, and that I was telling them they were wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, that's not, yeah, I said things like, no, I don't think that's it. But right,
Yeah.
then I had my idea of a flow state, they had their idea of a flow state. We were trying to work towards some sort of, understanding, but then it branched off into discussion of what mind meant, because I started using phrases like no mind, and they're like, well, no mind, what do you mean by mind? And then we start going off into this,
Right.
and part of my point, it's somewhere in all that was, well, it's hard because we're trying to define these words, but that's not what we're trying to define. We're trying to elucidate concepts, and we're trying to
Yep.
elucidate concepts through words, but there's limits to that. And that's
Hmm.
where I guess you go back to your glass beads and where the arcs are coming through, which I haven't read. I haven't read that book, but I understand. I feel I understand to some extent the concept of placing those. Yeah, where is the arc of light understanding going to come through from the original concept
Hmm.
through the trail you're laying out so that the other person, can
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, and this is a difficulty of the problem of meaning itself and how to communicate meaning, right? It's a huge one. Like you could take a lifetime trying to study it and trying to get over it. Like,
Uh, Communication. Once you realize how much loss is involved in everyday communication,
yeah.
it's hard to catch up to that. And then it actually, there's that initial cycle, I think, where once you start to realize the communication issues, then you have to go through like this whole other thing where you're like, why doesn't anyone else realize the communication issues, or do I
Right.
have some sort of condition?
Yeah.
And likely,
Yep. Been
a
there.
lot of us that think this way could categorize, could easily and are categorized in one or another, sets of conditions, where I think then it just becomes easier for larger society to discount your viewpoint as like, well, if you're labeled as such and such, then, well, I don't have to really listen to you because clearly you're a fringe viewpoint, where in
Yeah.
fact, maybe we can actually see sort of more levels of different things that are going on
Hmm.
than many people are used to being able to see.
Yeah, it's sad how it tends to go, but it's, I guess, not unexpected.
So that leads, I think, to part of what we were talking about when we got into this. So obviously, like, there's the meta organization work, or there's a meta organization writing that I do, which came
Hmm.
out of, which is done under a pseudonym and came out of, what you could call an awakening experience, or a lapse into mental illness, or both. And
Yep.
finding the way out of that, and finding a way to try to communicate the thoughts and experiences that are, going on at an increasing rate in your mind at the time. And then, you know once you
Hmm.
start to be able to deal with that, I think a lot of us also have a really strong urge to, like, you see other people stuck there. And
Yeah.
in my case, it came out of, not purely out of psychedelic experiences, but certainly experiences with entheogens and psychedelic medicines were, a part of why I was able to, you know, think the way I was, right? I mean, and we could go into the modern day research on, I think, why exactly that is.
Yeah,
Basically, I think it has to do with the dampening of the default mode network and sort of allowing a different state of consciousness than we were used to before some of those
yeah.
experiences,
To me, I think it has to do with some kind of like the dissolution of boundaries of that what you think is solid.
Mhm.
And my
Yeah.
experience, I had taken mushrooms probably like years, at least 4 or 5 years before my spiritual awakening experience. So I had been kind of pre whatever exposed to that idea of things not being as solid as you think. Do you mind if I let Zhenya in here?
No, not at all. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll let him in. Yeah, but the actual experience itself for me, it was just I came up to the limit of stress. Like I was just completely overwhelmed,
Mm.
and my life and what I thought it was had just reached the snapping point, and that was it.
Yeah. No,
Yep.
I feel that, and I feel I had gone through that before I was exposed to psychedelics and had those experiences earlier on. I think part of the origin of my alternate personalities were because of exactly that sort of thing, where it's just you reach the limit. It's really that your ego reaches the breaking point because there's
Yeah.
something that doesn't allow it to continue. Something has fallen apart, right? At the very least, your ability
Hmm.
to hold things together has fallen apart, right? Your
That
ability to hold
certainty.
your
Yeah.
ego, yeah, the certainty that whatever plan you had was going to work out, maybe, for your life, that and sort of, yeah, your identity with it, right? And I think there's all those little deaths you can go through. But let's get Zhenya in here
Hmm.
before we get even more separated on
Yeah.
information.
Yeah. Are you here, buddy? I don't know. I don't see his video. Oh, maybe he's just listening.
Sorry, guys. I
Oh, there
believe
you
I
are.
was on mute.
No, that's okay.
You were.
No, no.
Hey,
I have so many different places I can be on mute on. Like I didn't know which one it was.
it's okay.
Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. What's going on?
Just catching up.
Just talking.
Yeah, I'm not on my laptop, so I don't have my camera on.
That's okay.
Gotcha.
But anyway, Zhenya, I'm Todd. I'm under the Savvy Fox username. Um, yeah, I was just talking with Brian, catching up. We've talked under in a couple different ways in relation to a couple different projects, and sort of this is anytime where I'm showing my face, I guess it's real world as far as I'm concerned. So
Uh-huh.
I would say this is where I concentrate on more practical stuff, but happy to, it's the meta organization stuff still interests me. There's just different ways I would talk about things in different contexts, I guess, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Hmm.
It-
I
but
definitely know what you mean.
but that gets back to kind of one of the core issues I think you were discussing in some of the online things, which is in the SOTS post, which was sort of the delivery, the use of certain triggering words like seekers and system, and how yeah, how does that? No one's going to accept the payload if it comes in an envelope that they don't want to open.
Yeah, that's definitely that's part of actually. So this particular envelope is part of a solution for a demographic, right? It's not, but we're not under the impression that it would be um, global, right?
No, yeah, correct. I mean, I think when I talk about, so the Savvy Fox, what that's essentially my company, and it's been my literal company before, but I let the actual LLC. Yeah, I'm in the U.S., so it's like limited liability corporations, right?
Hmm.
I let that actually lapse, but then so Savvy Fox LLC is like the technology company that was going to be part of underpinning the collaboration software, which I have is like one paragraph development, like develop community collaboration software. But that's the whole thing, right? So is that, and when I started getting into AO, looking at AO more, when I got that energy burst and connected with a couple of you all and got involved with some of the more AO stuff, and then got into hypercards, and then eventually had to get pulled back into real world work stuff because I was burning a lot of time trying to kind of thinking about that stuff. But
Yep. I know the feeling.
it just came back to the questions that I was already trying to answer around, well, what are the requirements? What are we building? You know, and I think I feel like I get a lot of the concept of the cards, especially hyper cards, and when you can really abstractify the meaning of what a card is, and it's just, you know, representative of a payload. And then, you know, I started thinking about other ways to represent cards that having to do with sort of the glass beads concept and constellations of cards, and how one
Yep.
could represent constellations of cards that would embody
Do
ideas the
I
way.
have a product to sell you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the point too, is like, why I don't want to write something that's already been written. At the same time, when you jump in on the development of an existing product, and then you have to go, you know, you inevitably, if you think like I do, you have to go back and understand, okay, well, what are the core problems we're trying to solve here, and
Yeah.
what do we need to enable? In other words, what are the requirements of the, you know, collaboration software, if we're gonna, you know, if I'm gonna be a,
So I take it you're a
call it that.
developer.
Uh, I'm a technology guy.
Okay.
The amount of coding, the amount of hardcore coding I've done is extremely limited. I've done a lot of scripting, but
Well,
you
I
know, when you,
mean,
yeah,
that's like 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other, as far as I'm concerned. Is if
yeah, no,
if it clicks, it clicks, right? It's not
exactly. I don't make things pretty. I make
yeah.
I make the stuff work on the back end, and I let somebody else usually deal with
Yeah, I'm in
the
the
front end.
same.
Yeah.
I'm basically from the same milieu.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've also been working on stuff along this line, then, it sounds like. And I apologize because I'm going to have to jump off here in probably about 10 minutes to go to a pre-existing thing I have to do. But
Sure. Just let me send you. We're in this chat, right? I'm just seeing if it's possible to put a picture on it. I guess not, eh?
there's also well, and I'll also
I could basically. I'm trying to see if I can show you something, but it's okay. Um, if I can
no,
before
it's
you leave,
okay.
I will.
That's okay. Yeah, I was there's a way for me to do this here too. So,
You could share it a Telegram too.
yeah, that's what I was trying to do too.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, so that's cool. We were just about to talk about, like Zhenya and I, we were just getting together today to discuss about the dashboard. That's what we're calling this software.
Yeah. Yeah. So
We've
that's
been meaning to catch up with each other on that.
so with that. Got a couple of images here.
Okay.
Can
Yep.
you see?
See
Can you
that?
see that?
Yep. Yep. Can see
So
all that now.
yeah. Okay. Cool. So what you're looking at is what's called a conversation engine.
Okay.
On this on the right. So you see conversations. Thank you, lady.
Can you open up into one of the pictures?
Yeah. So this is like on the right hand side column. You see all the different conversations you have going on.
I
These are
just
the.
see photos, a bunch of photos. I don't see the actual photo
Yes,
itself.
I agree. I don't know
Oh,
if
it
you
didn't. It didn't highlight. Damn it. Okay. Cool. So you don't see that.
are you sharing only one application as opposed to
Yeah, I
sharing a
guess so.
desktop?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay.
I think if you change the share to desktop instead of app, or I don't know. I actually haven't used
That's what
Zoom
I'm
as
doing right
much
now.
as.
That's what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
Stop share. Where are we? Man, why does it have to be so convoluted?
Well, because we haven't developed the right software yet.
That's it.
that's that's the frustration of my life. Why are they developing the software this way? This is not helpful. Yeah. The short answer being they're developing the software to predominantly make money,
Yeah, for other
which
reasons.
yeah.
All right. Here we go, guys. let me share this. You see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the conversation engine.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's kind of, speaking of ugly.
No, 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 it was good. Yeah, that was okay.
So okay, so what we're looking at here on the left hand side is right hand side, sorry, is the conversations. As you can see, I'm talking to myself twice. One
Yeah.
conversation has ended. So that's one feature of this engine, is that you talk to yourself, as far as
Ah.
as far as abilities and things like that. It's not prevented from you.
So, well, yeah, that can easily take the place of notes then. It's very common to have like, well, here's all my quote unquote conversations, and then here's my quote unquote notes. But reality,
Exactly,
notes are just
exactly.
conversations with yourself.
Mhm.
Okay.
Exactly. So this is the part that's been sort of done, but so the rest of it is is now being built. You see the profiles button there, right? When you
Yeah.
activate that, you actually see different people that would be participating in this particular context network of
Okay.
profiles. So that's how you start conversations. So there's a layer to that. Above that, you see education, and profile, and all of that stuff. So education is your context. So this is where you get a fractal kind of shifting
Okay.
around. There's no button there yet, but there will be one to say like shift, and you'll shift into the one on the right hand side. So that's like a depth thing, right? Like it's a category, subcategory thing, and
Okay.
each category, it's like a huge tree, and some categories can loop back to the beginning of the tree and stuff like that. It's pretty convoluted to imagine.
Well, that's what. Yeah. Well, that's what is great to get into though. So it can conversations have multiple contexts then?
Basically, yes. So this is where the left-hand side column comes into play. So when you're in the embassy, so to speak, what happens is that this conversation becomes like a record that is now available for other contexts.
Okay.
And so this is so this is just by nature of starting that conversation, clicking that embassy button for context, and whatever's recorded there is going to be this just a growing record as long as the conversation is alive. um, then you go down to the great bonfire, and don't worry about the terminology just yet. um,
It's okay. We all have our own terminologies.
and which is more of a like a broadcasting situation rather than a personal situation.
Okay.
um, and now
Understood.
now you see all of these different conversations as like the main list of things to navigate through. So now you're looking at the conversation as a whole. Remember how I said there's like a record, and it's an on. So internally the conversation keeps growing, but externally you just see it as like this. There is this conversation. So that currently in my mind is going to look like a forum post essentially. So you can create comments that are besides the conversation about this conversation, and
Okay.
the beauty of this is that you can refer to messages within that post, right, as individual bits to talk about in the comment, or and on top of that, if you come back into the conversation, you can bring those external bits into the conversation.
Okay.
So there's like this flow of external internal flowing in, and
Hmm.
it's really quite grand in terms of how it's going to explode in terms of data entry and those kinds of things. So then, this is where Brian and I ideas really start to coincide, is with the crystal gardens.
Okay.
That's where all of these bits and pieces that were produced in the previous stages, right, can now be like tagged and classified and arranged in a more of a systemic way. And this comes together in the card game, and this comes together through the glass bead
Okay.
game. Like this is like the same, we're trying to converge
Mhm.
that section into software here in that spot. And last but not least, you got this field research lab, which just gives you sort of like this cosmic map of everything that's just been done and tagged and created and differentiated. So it's gonna like process that and based on specific rules and create this um, top field overview of a static overview of everything, how it flows,
Okay.
how it flows together. So, and the and the idea here is like not everybody's going to use everything. Like not everybody is going to be into like tagging and whatnot.
Right,
Uh,
right. Some
or
people just want to talk.
yeah, some people, and some
Yeah,
people don't want to talk. They just want to comment on what people are saying. So there's like that interface. So so the idea is to like the more it's used by different kinds of people, the more this topography will be laid out
right.
in the bottom of lab, and it's called a lab because like you're researching what the heck's just gone on. It's all feedback. It's all about
Okay.
re-feedbacking into itself. So this is the final part of that theme.
That makes
Mm.
sense. Well, I think, unfortunately, I'll break off here for right now, and then I'll try and join you guys again in a little bit here.
Yeah,
But
cool.
yeah, that gives me that gives me quite a bit to think about. We'll uh, we'll start with that, and then yeah, go from there. So that was great. Thank you very much, Zhenya, for introduction
I
into your software, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.
told you I have a
All right,
product to
Todd.
sell you.
All right. Yeah, you do. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Cool.
All
Thanks,
right,
Todd.
cheers.
Take care.
Cool, man.
The product.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that was fun.
we gotta get together more on like where where my work with the deck protocol kind of intersects this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what I really, really, really want to get into.
So how can we do that?
Well, right now we have a bunch of pictures, and I could start up the dashboard and share my screen or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, the problem is only going to be that it's not complete, right? So we just can't show everything. Anyway, let's begin with that. I'll just get things started. In the meantime, hi, lady. Yes. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, I am curious if you had any kinds of thoughts about your knowledge with the card game
Uh,
and and what you just heard is basically my biggest, longest sales pitch so far. Yes, lady. Yes. With my sales pitch, if any ideas already start to pop up in your head as to how the Crystal Gardens can function, um, starting like protocol wise, like how would we build a few, what kind of protocols should we build around this
right.
content that we have in the embassy and the Great Bonfire?
Well, we can start by looking at the differences between what the card game looks like and how it functions, and this software.
Hmm.
I think that would be a pretty good place to start. Um,
Yeah,
like
let's do that. Let's
for
start
one,
there.
it's kind of, um, I guess it's of note that uh, normally conversations that you have with people do not get recorded if they're face to face.
Yeah, this is
So
why the whole embassy thing needs to be clicked to begin with. Like it gives you that big but the context button to say when this is on, this converse, like everything that's happening in it, the messages that are in it, so long as this button is on, are going to be dumped into this. But on top of this, um, there's another.
hmm,
There is the lobby itself, which gets all the messages anyway, right?
right,
So it's not like um, the point of a conversation is not to seclude yourself into a private room and talk privately. You're in this big massive room, the lobby still. um, you're just having a face to face with somebody specific. That's the idea of conversation, so that nobody can interrupt it, right? So if you're in
uh-huh,
the conversation, you're not seeing messages thrown randomly at you for the phrases that you're saying.
right.
To see them, you'll have to actually exit the conversation, go into the lobby, see the reply, all that jazz. So there's a bit more. It's like to exclude noise. right?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, that's good.
So
Is good.
so that's to address the whole recorded thing. It's gonna like everything is recorded in this scheme. So
Hmm.
we have to go with that assumption. Just the rest of it is how it's laid out.
Right. So I wonder, we can also look at the AO software as just kind of a like and yet another attempt at
Hmm.
this organization. So within that, we are uh, essentially just creating cards.
Yep.
Like
Which are
we're
like
creating, and some of these cards can be upgraded to basically what amounts to a proximity guild or a commitment. Um, and that's all that there is to it. There's tasks and then there's commitments kind of thing.
hmm
Like it's very simple. But so where does that fit into the dashboard? How do you make
tasks and commitments. So this is where I think we need to have the conversation. Point like I think that's the end result of the desire that we have for this conversation. Can you
yeah,
see?
yeah, I can. Yeah, so because even though a task and a commitment is are of the concrete triad,
So these
what
turn on, by the way. See?
on and off,
Yeah, these are toggles.
but only one at a time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh, when it comes to profiles, you have more. You can select more than one, but this side is exclusive.
right. Did you want to stream to the lobby, or does that matter? Or
We can. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
I'm
we can.
not. There's nothing. There's nothing secretive about this.
Yeah, just we might get questions that might help.
Yeah, bonfire is probably the better spot, but
But nobody's there.
lobby should receive everything.
Yeah.
Lobby is at the bottom of the funnel.
All right. So yeah, anyways, my point there was that even though these are of the concrete triad, the commitments and task or execution or whatever, we're talking about um, basically like model type information,
Hmm.
like the binding material.
Yeah,
So that's why you mentioned the obelisk, I guess, and that this is where we want to end up going
yeah,
with our development.
yeah. I need to change gardens to obelisk.
Yep.
Keep forgetting that one. Ahead of myself.
No problem.
So, let's start with we have all these data points, right? Like let's just call them that for now, because as far as we can see from this perspective, right, it's up to us to classify what each data point is, aside from where it appeared,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You're talking about lifting out the abstract.
Exactly. So this is why I think there's a huge connection between the games and that particular button here. So we're trying to pretend for a second that we've had this conversation, right? Where this message
Mhm.
appears. Sorry. Clearly, it's not in a conversation. Um, what an here. Let me start one. Talking to myself again. Yeah, it works. So we're talking to myself. We have a conversation. Pretend we go to the Great Bonfire. We basically should see something along the lines of this Yevgeny thing.
Yeah,
We should see something along its lines appear as a message instead of talking to myself again, but like the whole conversation itself, right? Like a flow of posts.
right.
So mentally, are you there?
Okay, yeah, I guess so. So because you're referencing the conversation itself.
Right. We're referencing this thing that's going green and red and blue. Can you see the cursor, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Um, yeah, we're referencing the the thing that appears in the right hand column as being the unit of interest in here. Thank you, honey. Thanks again. That's my phone. Yes. Poke, poke, poke. Thank you. So yeah, so we have all these posts. We write all these comments on by like you'd be able to select them clearly, right? I don't know if you'll have much to do on this hand side in this context. That might have to change, like what happens on this side, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's a different conversation altogether. Anyway, so right, so this is what happens when we get there. Now we're creating all these different comments on these different quote unquote posts. Okay, this is the data structure that we have so to work with. Now we are trying your card to put these. So now we're making cards,
Hmm.
right? That's what I think is should be the main area here. Card one, card two, card three, card four. I think that's how it should be. Like to keep with the theme of posting, it should make sense, right?
Hmm. You mean like simply chronological?
Well, I'm I'm basically referencing the way I saw the bootstrap happen of your card. Like you put it down the first card,
Yeah.
which defines what?
Hmm. Depends.
Well, no, we're not depending. We have context.
Yeah. Okay. Like I can just pick one, like to
Yeah,
say
we have
deck
this.
deck protocol. Like so, we're having a database.
Well, right now we're just, look at the whole dashboard as like as a whole. We're inside education about education. Um, we just had a converse. We are having a conversation. I'm having a conversation about it, right?
Hmm.
Pretend somebody commented on the whole conversation as a whole, and
Yeah.
now we're creating a card. What's that card? We're in it like so. Remember, education, right? We've had a
Yeah.
conversation. We've had a comment about the conversation, so we have a context. We know we're talking about education, and we have all of
Right.
these, and then we have this sprawl of things to put potentially put onto cards.
It depends
Um,
on what was said in the conversation as to what's going to be tagged.
Well, let's start with bootstrapping the bootstrap as always. So look, I mean, we're talking about creating. Let's create the bootstrap for making these cards, for making these posts. Like, how would that look like? Let's play the game of making these posts. Just like you had a bootstrapping game for the game itself,
Yeah.
this is what we need to do here.
Well, okay, so now,
Except the card is now a post.
and we have these extra constraints like education about education,
Yes.
which
So,
I've never dealt with. So I don't even know what it means.
well, okay, remove those constraints and start bootstrapping. Just like the one constraint, bootstrap the bootstrap. I tried to give that as more of an idea as to like what kind of things that are available to deal with, because like technically speaking you can bring in the fact that you're inside of education, you can bring into the content, right, like into here. The idea is to bring something here, right? So you're referencing that conversation. You can reference a message in one, right? Those will be like links. It'll be something along the lines of link to blah blah blah,
Hmm.
which won't which won't work because it's
Yeah,
got
it's kind
validated.
of tough. Like we have to bridge to our works because I mean we've been out of sync with the dashboard since you've been going on the rampage for the last couple of weeks, and at least and more than that, like from my perspective, I'm like I just want to like have a database of things that I'm keeping track of.
That's
And
we'll get there. We'll get there, right? This that that idea that you're after, right? Like I'm trying to create the UI for it.
yeah, well, I
So
realize that.
therefore, so this is where you actually need to bite the bullet and sort of step out of that comfort zone and deal with things that you're not familiar with.
Yeah,
Um, that's
I'm
just
willing to,
yes.
but
That's all I'm asking.
I um like I'm trying to figure out how to bring what I know to this context.
Yes, and I'm trying to bridge that for you by saying, okay, let's pretend let's pretend none of this exists for a second, right? We have some arbitrary things that we can tag, right? That's what I was trying to explain to you with bringing the context into it. Is that we have things to tag right now. We have available things sitting in a database. Cool.
Okay.
So one of
What?
them being the term education, one of them being the who's in this conversation, one of them being the conversation's ID, right? One of
Yeah.
them being a message ID. Um,
Yeah.
so those are the things we can reference.
We could.
So now we're
That would be part of it. Yeah.
yeah. So now we're on a blank slate trying to make a card. I want this card to be about making cards.
Hmm.
You've played that game before, I know for sure. So I'm not entirely certain where would we be hung up.
Uh-huh.
So like, let's start making a card. Like, how does that game go again? Let's just reiterate the game.
Right. Well, so first off, I've gone through a number of games, and I would do them differently now, in all likelihood.
Great feedback is great. Let's upgrade. Let's hear the upgraded version.
um,
Teach me, oh master.
well, so what I'm
There's
looking
a
at is again what looks like the same conversation as before, like on your desktop. There's a place to enter text, and then what happens if you enter text? Like, is it just going to be?
so this is the lobby. Like for if you're outside of conversations, you actually see both messages. See that?
Yeah,
This is just to select who you want to talk to.
right.
Um,
And if you're making a card, is it going to look exactly like that? Just like one line and the date?
no, no, no. This is all I had time to build. So this is the
Yeah.
format of messages in the conversation. Um, the only thing I want you to take away from that, if you're sitting over here, is sure there might be a stream, right, or selectable, but there could be like maybe in an interface like that, they could be like drag movable, right, like drag and drop to rearrange based on the sequence that is not chronological.
Right.
um, this would be just like a different UI for facilitating those
Yeah.
things. I just haven't
Within
built
that.
any of that. Yeah.
So I would expect something like at least the ability to just generically tag one of these conversations, and then
Hmm.
have a tag explorer. So there has to be a place where you're actually seeing a list of tags either in or hiding.
So this column is ripe for something like that, right? Because there's just like a list of things to pick from.
Yeah.
So this is really what its generic function is the column from which you pick the things to talk to or pick the things to use,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. So you have to
So
be able to modify these entries and give them metadata, basically.
Modify these entries. What are you talking about?
Well, at least, so in the sense of like a card, like normally what I would expect from a card is it has a title. So a card has a title.
Yeah. So pretend like we have a field here, title, blah, right?
Yeah.
Like imagine this is not manual, but there is like an actual interface for this.
Right.
So yeah, I'm with you.
Okay. And
I'm just using this as a notepad kind of a thing.
yeah, we may also have context, like maybe potentially a string of context. Like certain protocols, you would have DEC protocol, but then you would also have like index card protocol, which is, you could say, is within the within DEC protocol. So your context may appear, like how I've done it is in the title itself would be a DEC index card protocol. So you just have DEC there, and you know that DEC is kind of like a bigger context.
So something along those lines. Deck. Which one did you say? What did you say? Deck
DEC
what?
index card protocol.
I'm just using the hash as a protocol symbol.
Sure. Yeah, but DEC as well on it itself is also a protocol. Yeah, something like that. So that kind of gives you context.
Oh, okay. So you're defining the type of card.
In the
Yeah?
title. In the title, yeah.
Yeah, but this could be like a select box or something to that effect as well. What we're talking about putting metadata into something, so we don't have to.
Yeah.
The computers can't read like we can. They're
Right.
dumb. But anyway, yeah, no, I'm just conceptualizing this. This is good. This is great. Let's go. Let's keep going.
Okay.
So you're kind of forced to tackle this one on. No, sorry, keep going.
So then I would assume that you don't, so in your card, you don't want to just dump a whole conversation into it,
No,
but instead you want to have highlights.
right,
So those highlights will link back to the conversation, but the card itself, the contents of it can basically be made up of highlights.
right. So this is where the entire idea of being able to reference an individual message within a conversation is also at play. I'm guessing that something like this interface would have to be the main way to navigate into the depths of something. So you'll have a conversation, and then when you're in here, when this is active, you can like activate something to get into the open it up or whatever. Like maybe have a drop down or you know
Yeah.
like what's available inside of it.
Hmm. Yeah. So I would expect a place within the card to be able even to just to reference conversations without even highlighting anything from the conversation
Right.
as a pointer.
So we're getting back into something like we have the title, log deck, index, and then we have msg 2, right? Pretend. So like 2
Uh-huh.
for
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So this is just a link. This is not even content in and of itself. It's a reference to
Yeah.
content. Yeah.
We're not even pulling a highlight out. Hmm.
Great, great, great.
So what else?
So this is just the index. Anything else cut to the index before I submit this message?
Um,
Because I
I
need to
would
look
put
it over after.
index dash card or something, index card. It's really about the it being a card.
Well, it's already assumed because it's internal to the deck.
Right, but within deck there could be an index of the deck, which is different from the media, the physical media of a paper square 4 by 6 inches. Yeah. Yeah, something like that.
You're just identifying the fact that this is a unit of the meta system, not the internal content. Is that why?
But I'm not really sure what you mean by that.
An index could reference something internal to what you're talking about, whereas index card is specifically referencing the card.
Yeah, I think
Gotcha.
so, yeah.
Okay, anything else for this one?
So
So this would just, it's an index, so therefore it references, let's say,
oh, there's more. So what I so you'll want to somehow tag the schema in there, and so if this is a protocol, it's
one
different
sec.
than
Let
yeah.
me just fill this out.
Okay.
We want messages, we want profile 224, but I just keep using the same numbers. You can just go nuts on this one, basically.
Cool.
Message, conversation, oh, comment, yeah, comment.
So there's a bit more we have to add at the top.
Yeah, where are we adding?
So one is the schema. The schema is model.
Schema. What are we?
So add this to, so below the title. So this is like title, but it's called schema instead. This is how we are, how the data is ordered in a card, and we're ordering it according to the model. So this is the schema called model. Also, this allows.
What kind of schemas are there, and the significant? I'll need to understand the difference.
Yeah. So hold on. So we'll add one more row if you can, and just call it so. Type, but so call it blue. Wait, yeah, blue protocol. So this is the type designated by the schema. So blue is the color that I associate with protocol. Yeah, protocol blue.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So what are my options with protocol? What else?
Constraint, commitment, and timeline.
Can you turn it down, honey?
Yeah, so we're saying what type of a card this is. It's the type protocol. Just protocol, and then if you want, you can put in brackets blue, because that's just.
Yeah, I'm not. Fuck.
No. We've lost
I
it.
kicked myself in the ass on that one.
How did that happen?
I got it kicks you out. Session expires at. Oh, you can't see my screen. Never mind.
I can see it. Yeah.
No, you can see only the. Hold on. Here. I'll share desktop. There we go. Can you see the whole thing now?
Yep.
So I basically have an automated session expiration thing going.
Oh yeah. That's no good.
It's not good for. What I need to do is I need to send updates to the server so that it knows to shut the hell up about it while I'm typing.
Yes.
Good catch.
That's the one.
Okay, we had. Let me just refresh.
So title.
I'm going to do this fast.
Okay.
Title. Law. We have deck. We have index. Card. We have, what was it? Something model.
Index card. So the schema is model.
Schema. You're gonna have to explain that.
Yep.
We had type protocol,
Yep.
bunch of references. Bam.
Cool.
I think I
Reference.
started a conversation with myself there. Interesting. Yeah, I messed it up.
Screwed up again.
No, I had the conversation selected and I don't have functionality to have like conversations about conversations.
Oh yeah.
The message is there, so we're cool. Anyway. Crap. I have to fix this.
Take your time.
Yeah, let's continue with, at least conceptually, you've seen me put a card in. So now you can have sort of like an use your vivid imagination to
Stop it!
let's see. Yeah, so okay, let's continue with let's continue with the what next step? Like what would happen after you create this thing?
After we make a card?
Like that, yeah. Like the first, like we've dropped something down.
Yeah. Then it would appear in the browser, like whatever your catalog.
Screw it. Oh, piss off. Oh, I think I know what it is.
What is?
It's the conversation. Yep. Dag nabbit. And got all these things to like track everything, and now everything is connected. So there we are. Somewhere in there we had.
No, don't step. Anna, don't step on Linky.
Dang it. All right, it's lost. It's okay.
No.
No.
Oh,
You finished
piss
one.
off.
Put a movie on.
So this is a day in the life of
Yep.
Zhenya.
Yep. Back to business.
Cool.
And now it's all working. Alrighty. Where were we?
Adding a card.
Yeah. Let's not collect anything. We're not selecting anything. Okay, we're round 3.
Did you click on Crystal Obelisk? You don't have to.
It doesn't do shit. Right. Not in the moment, anyway. But yeah, like for context, this is where we would be.
Yeah, deck, index card. Schema model, type protocol. Cool.
Success. Finally. We can
Alright.
finally claim success.
It's beautiful.
Okay, so we have this card. We finally got the card.
Cool.
Now, so clearly things need explanation, but also next step need explanation as well.
The what?
So
Next
the
step?
the next step. So what do we do now? And if there is like a choice-based thing, just like we need to reference that here we make a choice. What is it? Like,
right. I'm just trying to think of what else I would normally do in deck protocol. So the only other thing I can think of is that this card would have a context, which is basically like what proximity guild is this relevant to, and so that would come with whatever conversations that ended up creating this.
yeah, that would be part of the bunch of references.
Yeah, that would all be in there, but then you may want to add some.
Yeah. Well, no. This is like pretend. So we're creating a new card entirely.
Right.
We're not like from my understanding, just going through this process, some of my assumption was incorrect in
Yeah.
that this isn't necessarily tied to any particular conversation. It brings those things in as it appears. So this is an entirely new data point. You just threw a card together.
Yeah.
And in this case, we started to bootstrap stuff about conversations, or something
Yeah,
to that
and we should
effect.
expect this too, that either top down or bottom up, right?
Yeah, so we're still bootstrapping. So we don't have any conversations. We can bring those in.
Mm-hmm.
Pretend that the conversation is about bootstrapping the deck. That's the ongoing conversation, the one that you and I are having.
Right.
Yeah, like imagine it's in text or something to that effect, and that we can reference things that we're saying.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna go through this process, exactly that process, when I'm bootstrapping the actual dashboard. So that's why I need all of this.
okay. What do you want to like add more cards, or
Next card, yeah.
because
Like,
this is kind of like this is just a sample test. Like this isn't part of really the bootstrapping. Like I have a card called index card protocol, which basically says to use an index card as a database medium. That's all that it is, basically. So that's what we have up here right now.
so you've classified it under that protocol.
Yeah, yeah. basically.
So this is like classifying it under the protocol of creating a crystal garden or crystal obelisk data entry.
Yep, a medium for it. So it's kind of depends on the DEC protocol existing. Otherwise, why would you even care about an index card as a medium?
Right. So to reference this back, it's having the obelisk existing. Otherwise, why would you have these entry points?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So these are actually not necessary. They're part of the intrinsic nature of where this appears, the medium itself.
Yeah, and we can expect that random cards would just appear.
Yeah. So what we can do is we can create the card that says use this medium, right?
Yeah. Um,
So it's not redundant information actually. Never mind. I get it. It's to use cards. These cards will classify the cards. That's what will happen. It becomes a
yeah.
category thing.
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to categorize things, creating the categories in here.
Okay.
I gotcha.
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay, so what are other cards? What kind of cards can we put into play? Like, do you mind pausing for like briefly?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I
fine.
gotta. Okay, I'll, we can pause the recording, honey.
Yeah, I'm gonna pause it.
What's that?
Just resumed recording.
Oh, okay. I'm just changing the stupid timeout thing. Nope, that's not here. How did I stick it? Storage parameter. Auth. That's the one. Session timeout. Let's give it 60. Okay, you did restart. That's good. So we should be in better hands now. What do we have here? Expires at 58, and we're at 17 to 18. Okay, cool. I have no idea where it's grabbing its time information, but I think it's off by some amount. It looks like it's not time zoned. Okay. Anyway, back to more interesting things. Should have a much longer timeout now.
Cool.
Yeah, we drop down the deck. It's basically the reference. So what this tells me is that the very first card that this system should have seated inside of it
Yeah.
is this one and this one. The deck be referencing this whole thing that it exists, like this room. Correct?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. DEC protocol.
This is
What
deck.
it is basically.
This
Yeah.
is the deck, yeah.
Mhm.
And the index card that talks about what you can do here.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So those two are basically the only content they need is use blah to start to create cards, right? And use blah inside of that space for cards themselves. Yeah, makes sense.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except the only technicality here is instead of calling it index card, I would have a different name for the dashboard medium itself, as in a computational database.
Yeah. No, I'm bringing this back to your terminology so that we have common reference points.
Yeah.
I'm definitely like thinking in my head of something more hyper active. Can you
Yeah.
pause one more time? I have to do one more thing.
And we are recording again.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, so basically, just to reiterate what was just said is that before we even get to this card, we're going to have a card like this, a card like that, a card like this, and a card like that.
Yep.
So that would be all meta stuff that's going to be part of the schema of. So okay, go into a little bit more about schema and protocol if you can.
Yeah. Um, so this has to do with, now we'll have the luxury, I guess you could call it, of building the schema into the data structure. But if you're using actual paper index cards, um, there is a large potential for variance and basically using a card for however you want, whatever you feel like.
Right. It's like we're using text as for our conversations purposes here because that's all I have to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But the interface that I'm envisioning in terms of how this would pan out is going to be closer to like it's like if you take an entire office suite of tools and just like shove it into like one interface all at once, you know.
Hmm.
Here's some text, here's a diagram, here's like it's like a
Yeah.
free canvas.
So that's just to introduce the reasoning behind why I needed to make essentially, I guess it's a schema protocol, but then there's actually the data of the schema itself.
So okay, so you're trying to, are we talking about a way to
To differentiate between
in
types of cards.
yeah to well no, well there's this.
Uh, yeah, but if we change that schema, the meaning of the word protocol as a type could change.
Sure. So uh, so type in, so this is like a type and subtype or something.
Um, okay,
Oh no, this is
let,
this is like a grid, more of
the
a grid.
schema is your whole, it encompasses the whole database. So a database is of a schema type. You don't want to have multiple schemas in a single database, or the meanings of the entries will collide.
Hmm.
Right? As far as I know, like that's
Yeah, no, that's cool.
kind
That's
of,
cool. I'm just trying to follow everything that you're saying.
yeah. So when we say that the schema type is model, what that means is that the data we're collecting has to be of a specific isomorphic types. Those being protocol, constraint, commitment, timeline, program, concept.
Okay, so what you're saying is that this controls what can appear here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so we need a kind of, you need a sort of like a master schema. So that's what I was saying. Like there would be a schema protocol which says you must constrain the types of valid cards within your database. And then the actual model schema, the schema called model, is saying this color means this, or this signifies this. So in this case, our type signed here as protocol, that signifies that this card is of the type protocol, which means that it, within model speak, it's the abstract, the concrete of the abstract.
I think I am following what you are laying down.
Cool. And this was kind of to leave it open for other people to have their own interpretations of what a card does.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's for me to interpret a certain way as well,
Yeah,
because I'm interpreted it into a way how this is going to organize what's here and here,
cool. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose of why I want to do it. And on
Yeah.
top of it, of course, this ends up organizing this,
Hmm.
right? All of this stuff here basically is the way to organize what's in here,
And the rest of it. Yeah.
and by extension, this and that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this is the way that we probably would go about developing it. Is just
Hmm.
kind of like
Yeah. This is no.
bottom up or whatever.
Yeah. This is exactly why I'm having you tell me all of this stuff, so I can reason about it in terms of software and
Yeah,
pieces.
cool. Cool and good.
Okay, so this is going to be like a hyper organizational mechanism,
Hmm.
which is interesting because I need exactly that to organize these things, right?
Hmm.
Do you see what I'm laying down?
No. But I kind of.
So you have all of these cards
Yeah,
that imbue things with programmatic meaning,
and
right?
meaning, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, what do those categories mean?
Right. So
That's what we
some of
need.
these, so what we need is one branch of these categories is going to be these, right? So
Hmm.
this is a mechanism to feed back and control this, which feeds back and controls this.
Yep.
Because this means something else. Like when you do cards about, um, like when you do cards within education versus say environment, right? If we change this, um, the actual content of them is going to be different, right? You could still have this to be almost similar, but all of this, right, is going to be referencing something about the environment.
Hmm.
So the cards contextualize themselves.
Yeah, maybe.
It's
Um,
no, this is good. This is gold
good.
because I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want. I just. I just showed you with my fingers that I don't want two systems. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I get you. It's just that there are some core protocols. Like, I don't see how that would change too much. Like,
No, no, no. Like, see, so you know how this dashboard starts with education about education? It's basically
yeah,
one thing, not two. This is the same deal. It's looping. It's the bootstrapping material for itself.
yeah.
But this bootstrapping material in itself is going to be in the context of bam bam. So basically,
Hmm.
you kind of start.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
You start this kind of like in a vacuum, create categories, and then these categories can appear here, and then whatever is not in the vac and whatever else is going to be under the categories, like it's going to be relevant to them. It's just going to bootstrap itself that way.
Hmm.
This is
Cool.
awesome.
Yep.
I have now found my point of bootstrapping a dashboard.
Sweet.
Yeah, because this all of this is going to be exactly the same thing. They're going to be imbued. Yeah, there can be just these cards. Every single one of these things can be just these cards, except conversations, of course. But that's just
Hmm. Yeah.
because what we're trying to do is intersect a process, right, which is this, with with a narrative, which is this side,
Hmm.
right, which is the side of the network.
Hmm. And all of it needs to be referenced, as in the deck protocol,
Right, right,
this binding
including the
material.
right. So we use this to bind everything together,
Hmm.
so that here, um, this is like the explorer, not necessarily the tag. Well, maybe that's the counterpart to it. Because, and here's my reasoning, the lab is more of a research space, right? It's like a reading space, not a writing space, because that's handled by the first three categories anyway.
Right.
um and on top of that, all of these different spaces don't actually provide the best interface for exploration. All they provide for is, you know, just building the thing that you need, right there and then.
Mm.
They don't tell you like if you were to say you want to reference something and you don't know where it is, this isn't the space to find it, right? Because hmm, no, well, it is, but it isn't. So I kind of need to think this through.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I always thought of field lab as more of like, of course, like identifying that the dynamic between the abstract and concrete.
yeah,
Like,
no, I think this deserves a lot more thought than I just gave it. So
mhm,
I'm not.
yeah,
Yeah, I know. I don't. I hate it. No. Sorry, there's like a whole bunch of things going on at the same time.
yeah.
Anyway, what was I saying?
We were
Right.
just talking about field lab.
Yeah, we need to give it a lot more consideration.
Yeah. So like field lab, just thinking about that, um, what I was kind of imagining is like, you know that the top, like the Linux program top,
Yeah.
it just shows you your running processes.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of something like that I would like to see in the field lab. Like what
Right.
programs are running currently, and like select from some, start some, schedule some. And as far as even these being simply
Oh.
routines, like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
start
yeah.
this routine, I want to add to that routine,
Get
like
down, little girl.
modifying routines and such.
That could be the space to build the protocol and program and connect it to everything. Because part of the feedback that we want is we want conversations, we want um, commentary about conversations, and we want the classification of all of these different things to actually have some sort of feedback effect into those things that are going on,
Hmm.
right? We need
Yeah,
a way to feed something into it. And
yeah, that would be a running program.
No.
when the running program is a collection of protocols.
Right?
So we don't really need to create a huge distinction in terms of how what we build. We just build protocols, but then because they're enacted and the way they're enacted would be the programs. So
Hmm.
which is again the protocol.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, but it's actually running.
Yeah, and and those protocols are going to use the information from the right now. I'm still calling them cards, but we'll find out terminology later.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not against cards, by the way. It's a generic card. It's a generic term that can be applied in metaphorically.
Yep.
So yeah, yeah, that's excellent. That's what the field research lab should do. Create the protocols, which amounts to scheduling things to happen,
Hmm.
right? Which amounts to feedback into um, what's going on. So one of
Hmm.
those feedbacks is like, you know, to so one of the protocols could literally be like to limit what could go onto a protocol code deck card or something like that. I don't know.
Hmm. Some of these feedback programs, you might call it like a supervisor program to just keep track of certain things and make sure they're on track.
Right. Yeah. 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 No, this is perfect because this fits so well into the concept of each layer. Um, specifically the archetypical aspects of each of the individual spaces.
Hmm.
So one is program,
Yeah.
which is a collection of protocols, right? And they're like essentially one and the same thing. The crystal gardens is where you would build um, like the essence of the protocol, like the declaration of one, of like the specification of one, right?
Hmm.
And then in the field research lab, you can use that declaration, piece it together based on some sort of event.
Yes, that's you need the events. That's kind of where
Mm,
the program
but
comes
the
in.
event, but we have events: creation of a card, the creation of a conversation, the creation of a message, the creation
Yeah.
of a post.
Yeah. I mean, when you say a program is a collection of protocols, I'm thinking like yes, but it's in a running context though. Like you're using those protocols and you're feeding it
So let's
concrete
redefine
data.
this. Let's redefine it so that we can be on the same page.
Hmm.
Um, so basically, if you have a set of events that map to certain protocols, you can call that collection a program.
Cool.
Um, and
So
protocols can
like
and the
heuristic triggering.
yeah, and events can themselves be defined by the same mechanism, right?
Mm. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so this would fit. This is essentially a programming platform
Yep.
in that sense. Wow,
Hmm.
effing wow. I
Right on the
like it.
money. On the money.
I like it. I
Hmm.
like it a lot. And the coherence system is essentially going to flush out everything.
Yeah.
Like if something is not because the main building blocks, like where you start from, is talking and socializing and whatnot. All of the coherence
Oh, Nikki, you bastard, you bum.
my kids, they're just awful.
What did he do this time?
See, I'm
They
sorry.
hurt each other
Oh yeah.
accidentally, but it's
Yep.
just one thing after another. Anyway,
Hmm.
yeah. So it's gonna be based on those kinds of things that are out there in concrete, but internally we have all of these heuristics built in, and I guess some of it is going to be quote unquote beyond the system of coherence. So like the grandmaster level, if you will,
Hmm.
of the whole schema. And what I'm why that's relevant is because we want that to be the boot where the bootstrap sits, right? Because everything is a bootstrap first, and then it sort of flows out into out of it that into a fractal kind of a deal,
Yeah.
just like we did with this card. This card is about blah, right? In the context of say education, but
Hmm.
what we fleshed out is that there are other cards that are don't really belong to this context. They're above it, right? And we don't want to
Yeah.
lose sight of those cards, and we don't want to put them through the coherent system because they are the coherent system, or you know what I mean. So
I
that's what I
think
mean.
so.
So that's what I mean by the grandmaster level of coherence. So those cards can never be flushed out or filtered out.
Hmm.
Authoritative. Dang it.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. And no card is ever perfect.
No,
either.
no, no. It's an iterative process. So
Yeah.
you know what? Like that's why you would want to have a conversation with yourself to flush out how to create the car. Like you can have a conversation in the lobby, not under any of that stuff, right?
Hmm.
And then use that as your building block for all of this. So even the pieces picked up apart here and put together into coherent that can come from here.
Hmm.
That's completely self-bootstrapped system. Like it doesn't have to give meaning to anything. Like I can, like you and I can get a blank slate out of it and build the dashboard that creates itself. If we
Hmm.
know what the artifacts, because we know what the artifacts should be. So yeah, okay, we're gonna need to pause again
Okay.
because life calls, and I'll be right back.
All right. Pause.
And what
So
what we need
yeah.
is to get past this one card.
Okay. Do you want to make more
Yeah,
cards
I'd
or?
like to see how this list would flow, because I've seen how it flows back into its own meta. But now let's go back into something more concrete. We're at the point of talking about education, which is talking about all of these things, right?
Yeah.
So so I guess the next thing we would do is we would have, so these are probably going to be listing cards like these. Does that make sense?
Um.
Right? Because education consists of, right? So this is the guild, this is the area of concern, right? The area of concern in education is all of the natural guilds. This is just model basic stuff, right?
Right.
Education is the self-referential guild. And so we've arrived to making categories and have created all of these cards, right? And
Uh-huh.
now this education card just relists them, right? We would have done all of these things.
Yeah. You're assuming that whatever we have of the dashboard already is basically should have been a card at some
Yeah,
point already.
yeah. That's what came out of this whole conversation with you before this,
Right.
which is why I'm excited because I was
Uh-huh.
mulling over as to how to do this properly.
Cool.
Um, so yeah, so we can assume all of that. So we can assume all of these cards are created. We can assume that they are listed here because they are listed here.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
It's yeah. Assuming that
like
this card is referencing them.
this is how what we do here as content affects this as structure.
Yeah.
Um, this is kind of a different story because this is more about this actually this idea that this whole column comes from implementing, where is it, this, that's why it's structured that way, right? So these four
Hmm.
are intrinsic in a sense to this whole to this section.
Hmm.
The labels can change, but it's a matter of different things, not function though.
Hmm.
Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so part of that is kind of stable. What's not necessarily stable is the labeling, and I'm not sure outside of coherence what to tie that to. Um, so yeah, like, but potentially we could have programs running based on different labels.
Mhm.
So there's that, um, which is an idea I didn't have before.
Yeah, and I kind of just wondering about like, th- is this a workshop that we're doing, or like, what does
It
that mean?
is. This is a workshop.
Yeah.
This is the workshop of creating these
Hmm.
um, things, and basically the ones that are coherent, right, will get scores based on where they come from, right? Like, imagine that this whole card did not come through a video conversation, right? But through me and you being over here, I selected or you selected me here, like that. We start the conversation. We ended up here, right? We have a whole bunch of these messages, right? Um, which we effectively we can come to some kind of understanding. We can highlight the important ones, right? um, Whatever, but like the important parts that we want to talk about, whatever, we can make comments about them. Doesn't matter. So yeah, yeah, that's what we would do. We would be talking, and then we would be assessing our own conversation, go to the bonfire kind of thing, pick out a message out of the conversation, comment on it, so it stands out or whatever. um, and effectively come to a piece, a working piece of taggable material.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what makes it the broadcast.
Right, and then we end up here, and then we take all of these pieces, right, and we stick them into these slots.
Hmm.
That would be it,
Cool. Yeah.
right? Like, all of the pieces that we were discussing in conversation would land in here somehow, and with an interface I haven't decided on yet. So that we can flush out things that are of interest. Hopefully it doesn't become a, well, again, this could coherence could come into this somehow. I'm not sure how yet.
Yeah.
um I am sure about the embassy, so bonfire is a different story. There might need to be some kind of karma system, I don't know. Slash dot comes to mind. um
Um. Hmm.
and sorry, my wife is about to leave for work.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you could pause for a sec again.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Going.
Um, it's not that I have ideas. It's we're deciding on how to build this. So
Yep.
you are collectively now are a developer as much as I am.
Hmm.
Um, More of an abstract than a concrete one, but still.
Oh.
So, what do you think about my line of thinking of how to kind of go through the progression of starting out here, recording things, organizing them in a more, again, chronological, concrete way, organizing them again less chronologically, now more an abstract way,
Oh.
and then finally to have a
Wait.
way to organize everything into tasks and
Wait. Okay. Okay. Okay.
execution.
So instead of simply conversations, to be building up. Um, uh, so let's say we can come from more than just conversations. It can be events.
Yes.
It could be anything.
So let me
Wait, wait, wait,
clarify.
wait, wait, wait a sec, wait a sec. So if we have a a problem appears. Let's say somebody falls asleep at the wheel and they crash their car or something like that. That story can be a broadcast,
Yes.
which may end up being the reasoning for why a certain protocol exists.
So the thinking behind doing it conversation wise is what you would do to create that post, right? Is
Hmm.
essentially you'd go here, select yourself, s- type it all out, right?
Yeah,
Type it all out, end that conversation. When you do, because the creation, because the conversation itself is a broadcast, it would appear here as one. So everything you've just
yeah,
written, if everything you've just written in this context, in this post, right, becomes the subject of, right,
yeah,
and you are right. Hmm. Yeah, this would also apply for revision because what would happen is that you can take that post, right, single out specific messages out of it, right,
yeah,
create a new conversation with just those, edited it whatever you were you wanted, and that whole thing becomes the revised version of whatever you want to say. So you can actually refine what your thoughts are
yeah,
as you progress into a more sophisticated thing, up to the point where it's sophisticated enough to be a coherent post itself.
yeah. That's how I'm kind of seeing the difference here between embassy and bonfire is maybe at the embassy level, every single thing that you say in its atomized form is itself a separate broadcast. But then when you string them together meaningfully, it becomes a
Yeah.
meta broadcast
Yeah,
sort of.
so one of the ways to string something together is this what's called the conversation. It's a way to string a specific set of messages because,
Yeah.
as you've seen, it kind of you can actually have a message belong to two conversations, right? And when that happens, right, whichever one you've selected, it's there.
Hmm.
So it's actually that flexible right now. The only mistake I've had is to as I've tried to create a conversation with my own conversation rather than myself, and that blew up the system.
Uh-huh.
So that's what happened earlier.
Cool.
um
Yeah, it seems like embassy is more like pure potential kind of thing, and then
it's
bonfire
it's
is
it's absolute chaos
yeah,
from the perspective of assembling something that like a program.
yeah,
But this is where you have all of these filtering mechanisms, and yeah, you so the conversation can be like the main interface to get data in, and based on different mediums, right? It could just classify it based on mediums. It doesn't know where it's going to be stuck eventually.
yeah. It's like
Um,
Notepad protocol.
what's that?
It's like Notepad protocol.
Yeah, yeah, but that notepad is so refinable that you can have a piece of text in there that you go down to any other section, right? And it's like a valid um, content type of that medium. So, like, if this is a forum of a broadcast, like you can have a broadcast Donald Trump style, where you have like a bunch of disconnected phrases that have nothing but emotional impact stringing together, which is like what most speeches essentially.
Yep.
And then you can have um, like essentially an essay, right, where you've gone through phases of thought organization over and over and over again, and then there's like this layered um,
The
right?
history, like a history of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that this is like this could also tie in, incidentally, into having conversations about conversations,
Yeah.
right? Because not everything in that conversation is going to be the same. So it could be act as like a filtering mechanism. I haven't thought this through yet, so I don't know
Mhm.
if it works programmatically yet, but it gives me an idea to hijack the mechanism into a more coherent filtering device.
Mhm. Yeah. Interesting. So it seems like context itself is already tagging certain collections of expression into broadcasts.
Hmm.
And embassy itself, that view is just like the raw chronological data.
Yeah, it's like it's the personal verbal diarrhea, basically.
Yeah. And even what contextually ends up coming out as segments of conversation, that itself is even could be diarrhea. But within the bonfire, the one of the features there is going to be removing redundant stuff and like putting together these more coherent broadcasts.
Yeah, that's done through basically being feedback about these conversations initially, which
Yeah.
which will potentially drive another layer of conversation that's more coherent, and then feed that back into the bonfire, and then like it just
Yeah.
keeps it's a loop. It's always going to be in this loopy sort of um, ongoing uh, all the things.
Yep.
um,
Cool.
so this brings us where we're at the card level. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm gonna make sure nobody's hurting.
Mhm.
Back, sorry.
Yep.
So, yeah, we're getting into this crystal obelisk, which is incorrectly spelled gardens here.
Uh-huh.
Um, we have basically in a context. So the unit of data that we get from the bonfire is the entirety of the conversation plus all its commentary, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Like that's like our
We get many different slices
yeah.
of the raw.
So we can take that, right, and
Mhm.
essentially reframe it as one of these cards by tagging pieces of said conversation
Yeah.
as the schema, the type, the title, the bunch of references, right?
Mhm.
Which in this case exist not so much as they could come from here, right? Like the but which ones are we selecting for this card? And then we can take that conversation, create another card, and rearrange it based on some other aspects of the same conversation. Do you get what I'm saying? You can like derive these units of that more metadata about the same thing.
Mhm.
So this is the thought process that I'm going through right now. We use these conversations as a hotbed of creating these messages, which end up being all the different pieces here, right? this just gives it a kind of an interface to categorize aspects of what you of your diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
And goes back together to tagging, right? This is the tagging.
Yeah. Just so you know, I'm not looking at the screen right now.
I can see that, yeah. uh, I have been highlighting a whole bunch of things as I'm talking, but
Yeah,
that's
it's
for the
fine
video.
for the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point, I think you're seeing what the point of that is.
Yeah, I guess like just the iterative feedbacking and creating of the cards.
Right. And so the last piece of the puzzle then is we have this awesome meta unit of data plus metadata going on, right? We then need some form of making this an event-driven system, which consists of what's an event, what's the rule, what's the conditions,
Mm-hmm.
and what's the what the actions are,
Right.
which are
Uh,
determined by protocols, which are extracted from conversations. Wow. Or posts about conversations.
right. Yeah, I'm still kind of a little bit shaky on how exactly that works. Like
Let's
because
call it a broadcast. Let's call a conversation a broadcast in the context of a bonfire.
okay,
That would make more sense.
sure.
So we just reclassify what's going on as we don't reclassify the messages. We reclassify what's happening in this in the conversations tab.
Hmm. Interestings.
Last vehicle.
Are you following so far?
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking about a couple of things. Uh, one that, of course, the embassy being outside of the core abstract and concrete, similar to academic. They're kind of on the outskirts, and they're also no different than the others. So like
Right.
embassy will have like you could call it every single time you hit enter, you could call it a broadcast. Um, but within the embassy, you're not getting the context of a string of events in a conversation, like what could be contextualized as a conversation or about a certain thing or within a certain thing. That's the whole package deal of the
One
bonfire.
second.
Yeah.
Okay, back to business.
Yeah.
What were you saying,
So
sir?
I was just saying that the when you're clustering these broadcasts together, these atomized broadcasts, as if every time you hit enter it's a broadcast. When you're clustering them together, that's kind of what's happening at the bonfire. That's kind of what I'm gathering. Like that's what that's about.
Clustering them together. So,
Yeah, context.
a conversation is a way to cluster something together.
Right, but um, uh, from the embassy's perspective, it's only in the most basic sense of chronology, kind of thing.
Yes, but there's a heuristic to it. So You've had a conversation that's all Donald Trumpy. Okay.
Okay.
Do you understand that reference? I hope. I like what I mean by all Donald
You just
Trumpy.
said, okay, emotional language.
Like emotional, like it's incoherent in terms of if you can't piece together an essay out of it for to save your life. Um, it's kind of like all over the place. So this is like your first what we colloquially refer to as verbal diarrhea, right?
Yeah.
Um, now you go to the bonfire, you look it over, you make a comment, right?
Right.
You look that comment references a couple of messages and some text or contextualizes something. Somebody makes a comment or like or it's just you. Let's just let's just simplify and just be you. You're editing yourself, right? So you're making some comments about that, some comments about this, some comments about that. You reply to yourself, blah 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 blah. You then have another conversation with yourself. In this conversation, you pull in all the different messages and comments that are relevant to you in the sequence that you would want, right? So what appears as your final post in this conversation is a more collected, potentially more organized thought pattern.
Right.
Now you go to the bonfire. You go through this process again. Eventually, you'll get to a point where your final conversation is just going to consist of one post which references one of those comments, right? Because it collected everything at once together.
Uh-huh.
So it's that post, right? It's that conversation that you would want then to be the post that goes as is through to the bonfire and then further into Crystal Gardens, right? Because now it's got all these coherent elements to
Yeah.
itself.
Right.
It is this post. You take it to Crystal Gardens. You're still not seeing, okay? And then go through this process of making it into what we refer to as the card.
Right.
So doing that now gives it ignores everything that preceded that, right? Like it doesn't necessarily it doesn't it's not none of it is connected directly to any of the
Hmm.
thought collective processes, right? Like that loop happened in the context just in the embassy and bonfire, or potentially just embassy if you're not inclined to step outside the conversation and comment on it, or and just create a new one out of the messages you liked or something,
Hmm.
or just you felt like rewriting it.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if we're at the point where we can start to program these events as to what classifies as a product of a broadcast product.
Everything in terms of the embassy classifies as something that it's a broadcast, but not every broadcast um, is useful for directly useful for the cards.
Right. And so we're looking to assemble uh, an isomorphism in the concrete, which with something from the abstract.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And it's going to be a tougher one with this. Like so as you can probably imagine, you need to know a lot before you can do something useful at the gardens, at the workshop.
Right.
Like,
This
yeah,
this is why I was thinking, just why that idea came up before for me about um, collecting even a story, like about a person who fell asleep at the wheel or something like that.
yeah,
Like just as an example, like this
hmm
happened, and this was therefore a breach of certain constraints, and therefore this is a protocol that will ensure that those constraints don't get breached again if we follow the protocol, right? So,
right,
so
right.
that's
Because
taking that concrete story and turning it into an abstract
so
protocol.
yeah, so imagine having the concrete story as stage one, right? A comment about it as pause for a second, please.
Yeah. Uh, Actually, pause.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yep.
Recording. Cool.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, a lot of the stuff is not even going to be at the embassy in terms of a coherence,
Yeah.
because this constitutes, from our perspective, participation. This is why only messages and only like the only thing usable at the bonfire can only come from the embassy. The reason for that is for reference purposes. The reason for that is very straightforward, and it's basically you're saying I'm participating. Sure, you can have all of that garbage um, at the lobby level, right?
Hmm.
And it looks like our. And I'm sorry for saying garbage. I mean, it's not actual garbage. It's life.
Yeah.
Um, but my
Constrained to varying degrees.
yeah, but it's so loose that it's right. Like it's just gonna be it's going to look like your typical chat room.
Hmm.
There's no doubt about it. I am not concerned about it. It's perfectly fine for it to be that way. In fact, that's what I want. I want the people that are having conversations to provoke, not provoke, but um, um,
Prompt.
prompt. Yes, thank you. To prompt the people in not in a conversation and are just shooting the shit in the lobby kind of deal, um, without recording anything, to just to engage about the subjects that they're talking about.
Hmm.
Um, of course, there's the hope that this shit cut out. See, because people are in a conversation are not are only notified about questions and stuff like that are not that are by non-participants in the conversation. If that's the case, then they're not interrupted, right? So you can't have things happen like you can in the lobby where you and I be talking about something specific, very specific. Somebody says something derailing, right? And any other participant in the conversation is now a sort of um, what do you call it? Just yeah, like they're just disrupted. Their thought process can be disrupted
Yeah.
by derailment. That's that's very basic. And so this conversation system is of course to cut that out entirely initially, but it's not meant for private conversations. Like that's not the idea behind it.
It's for focus,
Yeah, yeah,
concentration.
you're in a bin full of people. You're not conversations are more like connecting to a specific host on a network, right? Like that's what it's for.
Hmm.
It's to cover the addressing of a specific set of other nodes.
Hmm.
right? But the noise of the network doesn't disappear. Like if you're looking at the whole thing at once, you're sure to see all the chatter.
Yeah.
So that's what I want. That's where it's
Yeah, we want a way to track context.
right. And so the explicitly setting the fact that you're at the embassy, this is like this got to be drilled in to whoever's using the system is that to use it in any other context, you got to begin in participation, and participation is your personal engagement with this whole thing,
Hmm.
right? It can't be from the flow of nothing.
Yeah,
If you
just
want to,
chatting in a space.
yeah, and even if you are just chatting into space, you still have to set this to have those messages available elsewhere.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they're going to be lost in the ether.
So I'm kind of thinking um, that maybe we could, I don't know, just talk more about. I'm kind of wondering about the, uh, I guess, the deck protocol that I've been doing with index cards, and like, as well as kind of some of the stuff. We basically see the same stuff in AO. Um,
Like what?
Specifically, um, so I think all we're seeing basically
Okay,
because
I gotta have you pause again
yep,
because I need to
okay,
take some time.
pause
Relax.
was being recorded.
The juicy parts are missing.
Yeah. Oh well, sorry, would-be grandmasters.
Well, it's okay. It's a lot of technical details, but
Yeah.
I think we can live without reiterating those parts
Yeah. No, it's fine.
and just making sure we remember them.
Yeah.
No,
Um,
I'll remember this. It's this is amazing because what this conversation is doing is it's creating the bootstrapping of the very idea that is being bootstrapped. I don't know. I'm in a loop here.
yeah.
Um, no, but like the data structure and the fact that we're using the visuals of the dashboard essentially to create the same thing content wise
Yeah.
and then feeding it back into its own structure so that it will present itself that way.
Yeah. Well, and presumably the structure came from content, and the content from structure, and whatever.
We
The
are
iterative process.
we're ensuring it is,
Hmm.
right? So basically, even though these quote unquote grandmaster level protocols, as it were, are going to have to be there by seeding, by injection,
Hmm.
they can still be injected by using the system,
Hmm.
right? Like it's you can literally sit there, fire up an empty dashboard, type
Yeah.
them out, like assuming you know exactly what you're doing, you'll type a perfect one the first time around, um, create a card out of it, and all of a sudden you'll start to have some scheduling happening and some this, some that,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. So I I just want to get back to a thought that I had about when you're saying conversations are the kind of material that's being put together uh, into these um, categories, or the binding material.
It's really the
Why
messages. It's really
why
just
don't
the
we
messages.
why don't we say it's the narratives?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Because
Because
all
okay,
narratives are
yeah.
not conversations,
I think a narrative is a great word. Is a better word than post, for
right?
instance, for the bonfire, because that's what's broadcast. A narrative is what's being broadcast,
Hmm.
and it fits together with what bonfire, where bonfire is
Right.
in the whole schema.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm thinking of stuff like, even if you look at like, how does the Bible teach protocols? It's basically by sharing isomorphic stories, narratives, right? And saying that this is the type, this is the archetype.
Yeah, don't forget, like a message in a conversation or a message on its own. Let's forget conversation again. Conversation is a way to exclude a distraction. Okay,
Mhm.
messages is really the unit that you're after internally. The reason you can reference a conversation is because it's not clobbered with distractions, so the messages there are clearer,
Yeah.
right? So that's where that's all ordeal is sitting at. So conversation is more of an organization mechanism. Messages as the unit.
Okay. Yeah, and conversation is a way of conveying narratives.
Right, right. The best way to isolate a narrative is by a conversation.
Right. Because again, I'm thinking of the dynamic between um, narratives and processes, right? The narrative is like an extraction of the ideal, which yeah, the process is an extraction of the ideal of which we see a sliver of in the narrative, and that's why that narrative is being referenced,
Hmm.
because it's either pointing to a problem or a constraint being broken or
Right,
something like that, or it's
right,
showing an ideal.
right. And all of these kinds of things are exceptionally prompt for the bonfire, right? Because this is where you analyze what you're seeing, the stream of the diarrhea, really, and you
Yeah.
can kind of think about it and say, oh, well, this is my reply to this part of like quoting, right? Like when you quote something,
Hmm.
um, it's very similar to that.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it's another way to divide sections of metadata.
Cool. Um,
You still don't really want to mine um, commentary like that for programming. You want to mine messages because messages are more kind of like isolated,
hmm.
right? And you can basically take them out of context. Is what I'm saying there.
Interesting. I'm kind of thinking to take a break. Kind of getting pooped.
But we didn't get to the research lab yet, man.
Oh no. Yeah, we did.
Well, we sort of did, but I think I'd like to cover it more succinctly in that it should be able you should be able to take the cards that you produce,
Yeah.
depending on their type, of course. It has to like actually be very, very strict in terms of which schema they're from and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But those cards that can be created could represent events, could represent conditions, and can represent then actions.
Yeah.
One second.
And you're putting them all together.
And yeah, when you enable a triad like that, it should fit into some sort of a callback system where the system is monitoring for that kind of event. So that's how it has to be tightly controlled in that schema part,
Hmm.
so that so that the two can recognize each other, right? So like the structure can recognize the content. Um,
Yeah.
and that will then reverberate back into scheduling tasks, responding to occurrences as scheduling tasks, um, or like if you tick off a scheduled task and say it's done, then you can say, okay, well, here's all the list of commitments that were had. Um,
Hmm.
right, it could
Yeah,
it could
that's.
really start driving the response feedback
Hmm.
of the whole thing. So basically it's a self-programmed entity.
Yep. That's the idea. What's your day like? Rest of the day?
I'm watching the kids till 7. and then Lisa
Right.
comes home, and then but I'm feeding him at around 5.
Hmm.
So
Gotcha. In about an hour or more. I see. Um, hmm, hmm. Well, I'm kind of thinking to just take a nap. I know you don't have that luxury.
um I would urge you to keep thinking about this though, and so that if we continue to well, we will continue to keep talking about this in different contexts. And so I'd like to be able to have a better back and forth than just sort of
Yeah.
getting out of sync,
Well, I
because
mean, if
it's coming
wait,
together really well now.
yeah. So if you want to keep going, we can. Because I'm not gonna go think about it. The only way that I'm thinking about it is if we
Well,
keep talking about it.
if we're going to keep talking about it, then we need to know what which direction to take it into.
Yeah.
Because I think for my purposes, for my thinking, for what I'm going to be building, for
Yeah. What do you think?
relaying that information right now, I have enough to last me for quite a while.
Right.
Um, but I don't want it to get to a point where I'm the only one that still knows what's going on.
Yeah. I think we synced up pretty well
hmm
right now.
So, but like we'll be basically having a lot more back and forth because you do know what I'm doing, and so we don't want to lose track of that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Agreed.
Outside of that, I don't really think I have anything to add. I have a lot to consider here myself.
Hmm. Yeah, me too, a bit.
Um, I mean, this is outside of the fact that I want the dashboards to be sort of, you call it cloud-like, so you can connect them together in a way like in a network, and it wouldn't matter which one you're logged into. It's like you're logged into a big meta dashboard thing.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about like all of that cloud-like stuff, and also personalized scheduling applications. So like
Hmm.
things that don't go out into the World Wide Web, but just sit on
Yeah.
your device and don't
Yeah, I
this
agree. It's
and
important.
don't leak the information out.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of like these kinds of things that it needs to be addressing.
Yeah.
I need to address how the entire context bar at the top is going to actually work and it gets pieced together because there's a lot of looping that needs to happen.
Yep.
So there's like a lot of things to build still.
Yeah. What
Um,
I'm interested in, or one of the things, is how to format a protocol to act as like an event heuristic or whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That kind of stuff, like technicals of how that works.
Uh, so events will basically have to be. I work with this kind of stuff all the time. The first step is to have native things, right? Like things that are internal to the system. So the dashboard has to produce
Yeah.
them and you can reference those.
Yeah.
And the secondary one would be to uh, have events generate custom events. So have custom events generated by something and have something catch that. So you
Yeah.
can say like whenever I say a message, create this thing called blah again,
Yeah.
and then you sit there and you go, oh, anytime that blah happens, can you please do so and so?
Right. And then you need a like
And this is
a system of hooking into all the different object properties to say
yeah,
if
which
this property is red, then don't do it.
and this is exactly what the card is going to provide. I'm going to think about if it needs a different name. I like it so far.
Hmm.
It's old school. It's relatable. You can
Yeah.
and I like the idea that you can kind of think of it as a notepad that you can take
Yeah.
outside the computing world.
And it kind of it's evokes the idea of a unit, a single unit.
True,
Mhm.
true. So Yeah, what was I saying? Sorry, before I said that.
Yeah. We were talking
Um,
about heuristics and
yeah, so this is where we're going to have these kinds of special cards where the schema of them is going to matter a lot.
yeah.
And those are going to be the piecemeals that we can build more bigger
Hmm.
pieces out of that can be referenced by other pieces so that it doesn't have
Yeah,
to.
wouldn't this eventually become a programming language that you could just make software out of?
It literally always was.
Yeah,
The
that's
whole
what it
model,
seems
the
like.
model speak has always been that kind of language.
Hmm.
That's why
That this one
that's why it's
spills
so
out into Meat World.
yeah. What's happening is that's why it sounds so jarring to certain individuals, and why
Hmm.
only after like drilling it into people's heads for a long time does it start to actually kind of fit together.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm aware of this. It is what it is. But this is a proof of that concept, none altogether. This is literally saying, yeah, it is that, and it's applicable to daily living. That's how you need to. That this is systemic thinking altogether. Like this is systemic thinking brought to uh, tamed, not brought to, but tamed. Yeah, under the model and through an artificial injection.
Cool.
And of course, it's going to sound like programming. What is DNA? What are cells? What are people?
Yeah,
They're all programming things. They are.
deal with it.
I know. Like, come on, people, just relax a little. Relax. Program narratives are programming. We're just exploiting the notions to its fullest extent
Mm, mm, mm,
and unashamed.
mhm. Yeah, well, there's power in that. The ability to more coherently replicate and flock behavior being one of them.
Hmm. And the fact that not everything makes it into being a card, and even more, even less so, things will make it into being protocols.
Hmm.
Just is literally not. It's literally going to be the sort of like the kind of not. I wouldn't say a fail-safe mechanism, or what do you call them? Uh, um, but it is the feedback mechanism that is going to if at first it fails kind of thing, to kind of like if it keeps going it can just sort of circle back and correct itself
Yeah.
into a healthy system. And clearly if it doesn't, it will just be
Well, if it doesn't, then you failed to load the protocols.
exactly. And they wouldn't be it's an indication of incoherence, it's death, it's
Yep.
and it's just, it's cell death, right? Like this cell dies and doesn't continue to survive and propagate its
Hmm.
internal structures,
Oh
which is
yeah.
what we want. Um, Beyond that, I'd kind of like to sort of inform you of my high level ideas so that they're there. Um, in terms of which dashboards I'm thinking of, like which would by saying that I'm trying to say that what changes is like the entire context top bar is going to like change into a different well yeah, for lack of a better association, it's based on whichever proximity guild it's in, of
Hmm.
which the entire fundamental the guild is going to be one of the proximity guilds, so that way it can be
Yeah.
looped back and referenced again.
Okay.
um, so yeah, so for each proximity guild you can assume that there is its own dashboard. This one that we're looking at on my screen is the one for the proximity guild of the natural guilds, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense, right? The one that deals with the mediation. This is the mediation
Natural
dashboard.
guilds.
Yeah, Natural Guild is the mediation guild.
Mhm.
We'll have another dashboard for the fundamental guilds, which all it does is point to itself as the membership guild dashboard. It's going to point to the mediation guild as this one, and the network guild, which is essentially all the different proximity guilds that are out there,
Right.
which loops back again into itself and clearly into the dashboard and also into whoever is using it. So there's all of that. There's going to be a personal dashboard, which is essentially where you have conversations only with yourself. This is where you do self-scheduling and all of that good stuff.
Yep.
And the main dashboard that's the mediation dashboard you've already seen, and of course the rest of the proximity guilds, which are going to probably be offshoots of things here. All right. For instance, if you're going to be talking about nutrition, which is found here, you can potentially switch context into nutrition, which will potentially list a whole bunch of things here, which could themselves be some proximity guilds to deal with, I don't know, vitamins and, you know what I mean, like timing and
Yeah.
diet, holistic diets versus,
Yeah. Or like just food security.
yeah, like a whole but like whatever topics it could spring out into. Like this is how I see those things connect into it this way. But at the same time, I see it the way I see the same connection happening through the more fundamental way, which is just the network of all the guilds. But the problem there is, of course, they're not contextualized in any way. It's just a flat list,
Mm.
right? This gives it more of a depth thing. Long story short, this is how I see different dashboards appear into be.
Yeah.
And this
I
is
wonder
how
how they would connect. Like.
so this is where you can need to envision this whole ginormous tree springing from the fundamental root, right? But
Yeah.
then it has all of these loop back connections into like when the branch is actually part of its own root or part of a different root even. So there's going to be a lot of confusion at first and a lot of that. But I think if all of that stuff can be properly made into proper protocols, then we don't have a lot to worry about. We just have yeah, we just have to bootstrap it.
Yeah.
And if we can come to the point of where we can bootstrap each individual kind of dashboard the same way, then we have succeeded.
Cool. Hmm.
Especially if they can do different things, right?
Hmm. That's the idea.
So I covered that. I covered its basic replication ideology, right?
Hmm. I think. I don't know. I'm getting tired. But either way, I think we've gone over quite a bit for now for today.
Yeah, like what I meant is that if you have a dashboard on one server and a dashboard on another server and you connect it to, then you have the same one big giant dashboard, like
Yeah.
seamless one. So what that'll allow is for different cells. Either
Yeah.
they're
That's
connected or they're not.
like
So we
peer
can
update protocol.
yeah. So we don't have to have necessarily like one grand dashboard for the whole world. We can
Oh,
have
you would.
cells of the same thing, and they could
Yeah, and of
connect.
course, everybody would have basically their own. Well, so
We're gonna have to navigate that, is what I'm saying.
yeah, the way that, like Scepter basically already has it laid out. Like you're able to verify the coherence of your dashboard receptor or whatever that the data incoming from a peer is data that's coming from the exact dashboard that you have. That's kind of
Yeah. Like I'm kind of assuming that all of that is going to be infrastructurally sound. Should Scepter actually exist?
one day. Who knows?
But outside of that, I still have to make sure that I'm aware of all of that as well.
Yeah. Yep, that's
Anyway,
cool.
anyhow, if you have any other points of interest, I know you're tired. Um,
Yeah, no, that's it for me for now. I'm gonna take a nap, but
yeah, so the broad picture is clear as mud.
yeah, no, it's good. Just try, just work away with what you got, and just if if you want to talk something over, then we'll just start another chat up.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to rest. So,
Yeah, buddy.
yeah, man. All right. This has been a
Cool.
slice.
Yep,
We'll
I
continue
will
this later.
transcriptize this and post it later.
Just give the lobby an immediate link, like a raw material kind of thing too.
To the video, you mean only?
Yeah, why
Yeah,
not?
sure. Yep, I will upload.
Cool.
All right, man.
Peace.
Talk to you later.
Bye bye.